Let's start with the before lecture chant. An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to focus on the fifth edge state, which is engagement. In Roshi's book, Roshi Joan Halifax's book, Standing at the Edge, that we've been studying for some time now. And we've been looking closely at these edge states because it is actually here at the edge where it's really possible for us, yes, to tip over into a darker or a shadow side of these 5 important human qualities. But it's also here where there is perhaps the greatest potential, a kind of boundless promise, Roshi calls it. And if we can ride out the pitfalls of altruism and empathy and integrity, respect, and now we'll be talking about engagement, we have the greatest opportunity for growth and for perspective and wisdom. And we know this to be true. Our greatest difficulties can offer us the most fertile ground in which to grow. And on just a personal note about the promise of being at the edge, this risky place for us, if you will, I was given some really helpful perspective on how transformative being at the edge can be. And this was in the first year of my chaplaincy program in 2021. And I had signed up for Dokusan practice discussion with Tova Green. I think some of you know Tova. She's a resident teacher at San Francisco Zen Center. And during Dokusan, this talk with her, I made mention of how timid I was feeling, kind of scared I was feeling on Zoom with our large group. It was maybe 50 to 60 people in this chaplaincy setting. And I compared myself to, the proverbial deer in the headlights when I had to speak or when I was called on, literally just kind of froze for a moment. And she was listening to me. And then she looped back around to me feeling this way, as if I were a deer in the headlights. And she offered me a really helpful visual. And it was not a sharp edge that one might teeter on, like Roshi is talking about, but rather three concentric circles. And she said that this first circle is really kind of our comfort zone. Most likely it encompasses our usual experiences, our normal life, in which we probably function quite well and without much risk, if we're lucky, I guess. And then the next larger circle contains situations that maybe are familiar to us, but also might include new situations, new experiences that stretch us and challenge us. For example, we might think of being asked to give a presentation to a group on a topic that we are somewhat familiar with. So the risk or the stress around that might not be all that high. We might feel some anxiousness, but we probably still feel that we are grounded enough to move forward. But this third and this outer circle represents kind of this high risk area. Perhaps places we actually do not want to go, experiences we want to avoid out of fear, or maybe because they do in fact present substantial risks for us. But Tova then focused just on this edge between the second and the third circles. In fact, just the second circle just before it goes into the third circle, saying that it is actually through a willingness and an intention to meet a certain amount of risk, to actually go to the edge before we step into this more frightening, higher risk situation. Push ourselves to the edge where we can feel grounded And it's really here where the magic happens. It's here where our potential for growth can really be met. So whether we see Roshi's edge as this imposing mountain with this abyss, or if we're seeing these three concentric circles or some other visual that you might have in your head, standing at this edge, we have the opportunity for things maybe going wrong and causing suffering. But also, here we are at this edge of great promise and growth. So as we begin our look at this fifth edge state of engagement, we're bringing along with us all of the experiences that we now have of the other four that we've discussed previously, and how that felt for us to be at the edge when we're talking about those, and perhaps even falling over the edge, but recovering. So we have this bit of knowledge and experience that we can bring forward when we're talking about engagement. But first, let me share how it's defined in the book. It's described as a healthy relationship to our work and our service to others. And we can find that in this solid ground of engagement that we can be very gratified. We might find strength in what we do. And whether we are talking about our livelihood that supports us, or our volunteer services, tending our garden, or our grandchildren, or sitting on our cushion, healthy engagement enhances the quality of our lives and the lives of others. And it's characterized, in Roshi's words, by energy and involvement and efficacy. We quite simply can feel nourished with a sense that what we do makes a difference for ourselves, for others, for this very earth. So engagement can feel very authentic. It arouses a sense of real connectedness in us. It's this feeling of wholeheartedness. And we need only think of work, actually, that we've had to do in our lives, which did not arouse this in us, to understand the value and significance of wholeheartedness. And probably all of us have had that experience. But you know, I really love this word, wholeheartedness. The more I say it, the more I'm going to mess it up. Wholeheartedness. I feel that when it's in my mind, and especially when I say it out loud, I feel like the word itself arouses the very thing in me. The very word wholeheartedness arouses wholeheartedness. And we can say that sincere engagement has as a root this wholeheartedness as an intention. And again, we can think of tasks that we do, jobs we perform, how we serve others, and of course, Zazen, meditation. Our practice and our study reminds us, it trains us really, to bring our whole heart, mind, and body to the moment. So if we're feeling fidgety during Zazen, our minds are wandering, we just bring wholeheartedness to noticing that. We bring our attention and our curiosity and engage sincerely in that moment, one moment after another. And we all know that there are times when we feel we cannot give it our all. Maybe we are depleted or distracted. And that is the reality. And of course, it's okay. And when this happens, when we feel we cannot give 100% of our heart, then we just accept that. And we do that 25% or that 50% wholeheartedly. All the while bringing awareness to the fact that we are aiming for full wholeheartedness, even if it isn't possible in this particular moment. And as Mary Ellen often says, just show up and do your best. And I'll add, don't judge yourself. And just a little bit about busyness, which Roshi writes a bit about. You know, busyness has many benefits, as you probably know. It's a behavior that really is fueled by this neurotransmitter dopamine. So it motivates us to do things and want things and to accomplish things. It's known to improve our thought processes. It helps us produce energy, and it provides great satisfaction for sure. Keeping busy as an older adult has benefits for cognitive function. Even feeling stress, for instance, about meeting deadlines because you're so busy, or giving a Dharma talk, have similar benefits to the stress of exercise on the body. Our immune systems and our memories get a boost. And obviously, busyness is particularly healthy if we are motivated by service to others and the world. And what is especially important is, of course, again, to be wholehearted in our efforts, even in busyness. So far, so good with regard to the edge state of engagement. But as with the other four, we can easily fall over the edge. And basically, this leads to one major thing: burnout. And I can imagine that most of us have felt some of the effects of burnout throughout our lives. And, in psychological terms, you can recognize probably that if you're feeling burned out, you might be exhausted emotionally and physically. You might have a kind of cynicism about your work or the good that your work is doing or your service. And also you might feel it's ineffective, that you're being ineffective. So compare these three to the three factors of engagement that I mentioned earlier. Engagement is energy and involvement and efficacy. Additionally, our busyness generally is considered to be a virtue, especially in the West. And we might notice that as workaholism. It's kind of an addiction that society actually condones. Yes, work harder, work more. Being productive is really highly regarded. But Roshi compares this to something like becoming a hungry ghost, an archetype in Buddhism for a person with an appetite that can never be sated. And in fact, whatever a hungry ghost eats turns to poison. So workaholism is like that. And so is power and ambition and competition and fear if it's taken too far. All ego poisons that can and do lead to burnout. And one of the premises of this book that I've mentioned before is, of course, the importance for us to recognize our own behaviors and our own tendencies that risk nudging us over the edge. Our ability to predict and then notice our physical and emotional and mental states is just part of the practice. And by bringing awareness to these sensations and these thoughts and these feelings, we can learn to stay grounded on the sometimes precarious edge. We can bring ourselves back before any harm can be done. Now, as is usual in her book, Roshi discusses practices that can support each of the edge states. And I'd actually just like to talk a bit about just one of these today, as it relates to the broader topic of work and service. Specifically, what we have in our tradition, work practice. You've probably heard this expression before. And I'm thinking people come to meditation for a variety of reasons, but a very common one is people think that, feel that meditation will help them with stress. And, you know, I remember talking to a friend of mine about my Zen practice. This was years ago. And at the end of the conversation, he said, "Wow, and you still have stress." I said, "Well, yes, I'm human after all." But we understand that in Zen in particular, in meditation, we're practicing to bring awareness to the reality of our very lives, stress and all, and bringing mindfulness to what we do. This is particularly important in Zen. You know, a few years ago, Mary Ellen invited us to join her during a Sangha week at Tassajara Zen Center. Some of you were there. And the morning after we arrived, which is the way things are done at Tassajara, we gathered after meditation to receive work assignments, what is called work practice. This has a long, long history in Buddhism, by the way. It's sort of a combination of the contemplative side of Buddhism and the work ethic of China. Those kind of came together into what we now call work practice. But most of us in the group were assigned to the kitchen. And I was happy with that. Chris was there, Al was there, a number of us in that room. And, you know, working in the kitchen is something that most students eventually will be doing, most Zen students, at some point. Here in our Zendo, the equivalent practice would be to make and serve tea, as Chris has been doing, and arranging flowers, as Chris has been doing. But that first morning, we spent, I don't know, three and a half hours prepping food, large bags of potatoes and carrots that we had to peel and chop. There's this myriad of vegetables and fruits that we had to get ready for the luncheon. And such common work as this, work practice, is a door to meditation and a precious offering to others. And in the words of Norman Fisher, a much beloved Zen teacher, and I quote him, "When we treat our work as an offering, we give it freely for the benefit of others." And he goes on to say that when we see and feel work as an offering, it is a kind of burning up of the self in the very activity of the work itself. Not holding back, wholeheartedness. So work can become a profound way of cultivating wisdom and compassion. Over, I'd say 20 years ago, 22 years ago, I spent some weeks at a Thai forest monastery. And there we began our day at 3:30 a.m. with the first meditation. It was deep in the jungle in a large open-sided room. It was wonderful. And then an hour and a half later at 5 a.m., we shuffled back along this still very dark jungle path, and we started our work practice. And I volunteered again for working in the kitchen alongside the many village women and men who came every day to feed the monks and the other residents and guests the one meal of the day, which was served around 11 a.m. And this was my first experience with work practice, at least in a Buddhist context. And on the first day, a villager showed me which knife to use and how to use it on the vegetables. And I have to say, you know, in Thai cuisine, the vegetables are chopped in a certain way for each dish. So you can't just start whacking at vegetables. You have to do it in a certain way. So they taught me that, and I really felt I was putting my whole attention into chopping and cutting vegetables. And then another woman came up, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Come over here, I have another job for you." I said, "Okay." And she asked me if I would help them prepare for a really large group that they expected that day for lunch, coming from Bangkok mostly, because it was an important Buddhist holiday that weekend. So I followed her over to a table and she showed me what to do. And I looked incredulously at loaf after loaf after loaf of packaged white bread and dozens of sticks of butter and large glass jars of marmalade. And I was not happy. My ego took over. I thought, well, just because I'm the only foreigner here doesn't mean I should have to go prepare this very un-Thai food, you know. And as I recount it now, I can't even believe I felt this way. You know, it feels foreign to me now, but you'd have to say I hadn't quite got the idea of work practice yet. But I'll always remember that. It helps bring me back. So as we ponder our own work, whether our profession or a menial job or volunteer work, let us embrace it as work practice, a compassionate offering to others, which we give wholeheartedly. And in this chapter, Roshi quotes the Buddhist teacher Clark Strand, who emphasizes, quote, meditating inside the life you have. He does not separate out meditation as something outside or apart from our lives or our livelihoods. In fact, I really love this quote of his. Meditate inside the life you have. If you are an accountant, meditate inside an accountant's life. And he ends with this poignant thought. Wherever you want to illuminate your life, meditate precisely in that spot.